Welcome back to the Indie Zone podcast. My name is Kathy. If you look at page 3 of Judge Hippler's court order regarding denying Mr. Koberger's motion to strike or to limit testimony of various state expert witnesses, you will see the part related to Agent Nicholas Balance. It says here, Agent Balance was primarily involved in the analysis of cell phone records in the investigation and is disclosed to testify in the state's case in chief about his analysis of AT&T cell phone records for the defendant, Madison Mogan, and Xana Kernodle, as well as his own drive testing measurements to determine the use and general location of their cell phones between June 2022 and November 2022, and accompanying his initial disclosures is his 30-page CAST report, which discusses and maps the data he reviewed and the methodology employed. His supplemental disclosure goes through each page of the CAST report to discuss its significance. Mr. Balance will also discuss topics pertaining to how cellular tech works, particularly how cell towers operate and how cell phones connect to those towers, how usage data is reflected in call detail records, and how those records provided by AT&T for the target cell phones in this case were used to create cell site maps showing their general location before and after the crime and their direction of travel. In challenging Balance's case-in-chief disclosure, defendant provides the affidavit of his cell phone data expert, Cy Ray. Mr. Ray complains he is unable to identify Balance's methodology, which was described in the CAST report. Ray states that the CAST report omits data and or fails to mention how certain AT&T data was utilized in his analysis, mainly the handoff data and drive test mapping, and why some data was, according to Mr. Ray, ignored. He asserts the submitted data and methodology is exculpatory, and without it, he cannot fairly analyze Balance's work. According to the state, however, its disclosures sufficiently identified Balance's opinions, facts, and data he relied upon, and defense's concerns are fodder for cross-examination. In fact, Balance's rebuttal disclosure, the state marches through each concern outlined by Ray, offering additional explanation about what Balance considered, including the handoff data and why. Defendant, however, asserts the attempted clarification in the rebuttal disclosure is insufficient, arguing there is no disclosure as to why he has omitted 95% of the relevant coverage maps for his test driving, no analysis or mapping of the handoff data, and no documentation provided of the CAST report's peer review process. At footnote 6, the court notes here, there is no requirement under Rule 16 that state provide peer review documentation of an expert's report. Likewise, the rule does not require an expert to identify the data they did not rely on or why they did not rely upon the data. This goes on. However, the fact remains the defendant has all the data that Agent Balance relied upon to form his opinions, which are expressed within his CAST report. And then the court continues. While his methodology might not be set forth with as much specificity as Mr. Ray would like, Rule 16 does not require that detailed methodology be provided. It requires merely opinions, facts, and data for those opinions, and the witness's qualification, citing 2 ICR 16b7. To the extent defendant believes Agent Balance omitted important information or is relying on insufficient information for his opinion, this is for cross-examination, not exclusion. Moreover, if an opinion is not reasonably set forth within the disclosure, it will not be allowed. This will now conclude this episode of the Indie Zone. My name is Kathy. Thanks for joining us here today.